I am Terry Doran from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Well, I make documentaries, and I've been around the world making documentaries. I won some awards, and I hope I have a few tips to share with your viewers that might be helpful for them. Well, the intangibles, by that I mean you're getting started. How do you get started? It has to start with an idea from somewhere. Maybe somebody's hired you. Some of my documentaries have been commissioned, like Voices of Hunger from the Community Harvest Food Bank. Okay, there the idea is given to you, what they want, but you still have to figure out how do you do a documentary about hunger, because there's so many different aspects of it. I think funding is a difficult part of film raising. It's not a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, and it's like gambling. You can put the work in. There's no guarantee you're going to get the grant. I'm talking usually if you're making films. There's different ways of funding, but usually I would try to get grants. I know you can get sponsors, and I mentioned a commission from the food bank, so they put most of the money for that documentary, but it's probably my least favorite thing to do because you've got to wait too on the answer. So while you're waiting, what do you do? Do you start shooting and hope you get the money, or wait till you hear about the grant? I've gotten grants from a lot of different places, and I've been rejected a lot of times, and sometimes I just plow ahead and do it. If you try to think of everything, and then the major thing you didn't even occur to you because you're so busy with, wow, this building's perfect, and getting it all. Like I wrote a play that we performed last year, but unfortunately it was outdoors, which I wanted to do it outdoors. It was at Headwaters Park in Fort Wayne, and across the street at the same time was a major rap concert, and the music definitely interfered with the play. And I thought of, 1,000 different things, and this applies to filmmaking. It's the same thing. It's a creative adventure, and you try to think of everything, and then the major thing didn't even occur to you, what's going to be across the street. This is one of the things about filmmaking. This stuff will come up all the time. And if you're lucky, you think of it in advance and you can head it off. If you don't think of it, you're going to have to live with it. There's nothing you can do about it. I know in the notes I sent you, I said plan, plan, plan some more, but you also have to be flexible. You have to be able to change your plan, because maybe something's just too expensive, for example. Another thing about making documentaries that people might not think about, which you might run into, is you're out in the field, how much do you shoot? At first, I would shoot everything. Then I learned the more you shoot, then the more stuff you got to look at, the more stuff you got to edit, the more stuff you got to. So I started then to sort of edit in my mind uh, what I would shoot, so I wouldn't have tons of stuff. Now that might not be good for everybody. I know some people who make documentaries shoot everything. The main thing that will come up, somebody just starting out, is fear, I think. Can I do it? Do I have the ability to do it? Somebody's giving me money. I think, am I going to waste their money uh, because I don't have the talent to pull this off? And you got to overcome that with some common sense. I mean, some things you should be fearful of, and maybe you can't do, but there's a lot of things you can, and you need to overcome that with love, with passion. But it's a lot of work, and maybe if you have a lot of money and all that, but if you don't, it's a lot of work, and you really got to be prepared to put a lot of work into it. And if you don't have a lot of money and you're doing a lot of the work yourself, like I did the research, fundraising, write the scripts, you get the crew. That's a lot, and but it can be done. You can't let that stop you. If you really have an idea that's burning at you and you want to tell it, you got to get it out. Well, I think in production, I think I had mentioned something about using imagery that is the opposite of what the narration is saying. So, for example, the first documentary I did, and maybe still the best, was The Shadow of the Dream, which was about a nationally known murder story in Hollinsburg, Indiana, Valentine's Day, 1977. Betty Jane Spencer, some of your viewers probably heard of it. Betty Jane was with her 3 stepsons and her biological son in her mobile home out in the country, and her husband Keith had just left to go to work at an Indianapolis TV station. And poor guys about the age of the teenagers that were in the house with her came into the house. Nobody locked their door. They just walked in. They had sawed-off shotguns, laid them on the floor, and murdered them for the fun of it. That was a testimony in trial for the fun of it. It's horrible. They shot Betty Jane in the head, but she had a wig on, and the wig flew off, and they thought she was done for. She wasn't. She lived. She crawled on her hands and knees to the nearest neighbor to call the police. And Betty Jane was on my show, Theater for Ideas. We did a show about victims. She became a champion for victim rights. Wonderful woman who I admired immensely. I had said I like to do shows of people I admire. This woman, you imagine what she went through and still come out of it as a fighter for other people, for victims. So she gave me permission to do a documentary. Now, here's an example of one of the things I put about obstacles: critical commentary. So many people said you cannot tell the story of Betty Jane Spencer in a half hour. That's what I had a budget for, a half hour. I did it anyway. Now, what they were saying had merit in the sense of, if I wanted to go, and again, it goes back to all this footage we were talking about. I could have gone into Betty Jane Spencer's life, and when she's a little girl and all that. These are decisions you have to make. I'm not saying that would have been bad. I'm just saying I didn't want to do it. It was not my intent. I wanted to focus 30 minutes on this horrible crime and the incredible resilience of this little woman. I mean, she's small in stature, not somebody you'd look at and say, boy, here's a big champion for victim rights. And so I did it, and it turned out great. And it's very emotional, very powerful film, and you could hear a pin drop in that room. Nobody was talking. And it's because of Betty Jane, and as I said, I try to do justice. Somebody tells you their story. This is important to me to tell aspiring filmmakers. Somebody trusts you with their life, with their story, with something this sensitive. You owe it to them to go through hell, if it takes it, to show them in the light they deserve, period. And you just have to have faith in yourself that you can do it. And you look at the footage, if you think you didn't do it. She was still living in the same house. It is the most emotional thing I've ever done. She invited me to her house, the crew, and she sat there and told why they still live in that same house and how the memories of those four boys. And that show started, getting back to my point, with beautiful footage of scenery. It was a beautiful summer afternoon, and the footage was sunny, field, green grass. The voiceover was her. I used the interviewer, the person I interviewed voice, saying, I will always remember that day. It was so horrible. Something like that. I hate to paraphrase. She was so great. But anyway, what she said was the exact opposite of what you're seeing. Why did I do that? Because the conventional way would have been to show blood, to show bodies, to show headlines. Because I thought that was the most powerful way to tell that story. Anyway, that's an example of imagery. And I think that we were talking about how much footage you're going to shoot, whatever you shoot, whatever you put in there. I think every image you use should have a point, should move the story along, should in some cases tell the story. Sometimes I've made things with no narration and let pictures just kind of move the story along by itself without any narration. Depending on the theme, the tone, the feeling you want. That's another thing. That documentary has elements of literature, tone, irony. You want something soft, like that opening I just described. That was a soft opening for what was being described, for sure. Or you want something harsh. It's just angry, and you need to put that right out front. I mean, I went, what happened? I had a heart attack because I got too obsessed. That's another thing. Learn from me. Yes, be obsessed. It takes obsession, but use common sense too. Take a break. Your health is way more important than anything, because if you're not healthy, you can't do this stuff. I guarantee you. You cannot do it. You got to be in good shape. And take a break. Use a little bit of sense, but have passion. Passion's got to drive you. You really got to want to tell the story. You really put yourself in the place of these people. There's so many elements. Imagery, there's narration. I write the script of all my documentaries. You can have somebody write it. Then you write the script, then get all the footage to fit the script. I'd usually do segments. I'd have the beginning, like the Eagles and Eagle Gone, then I'd write a script for that part of it, and then I'd go to another part. I don't think I've ever had a complete shooting script for the whole thing from start to finish. And of course, you're always adjusting, rewriting, adding this. Another thing I do with interviews, which is my personal preference, is I have them transcribed, because for accuracy and also for editing. Although it takes a long time to transcribe, it's a lot easier when you go to edit if you've got the words in front of you and you say, I want this part, then you find it on the tape and use that. That's not always possible, not always maybe even preferable because of the time involved and so forth, and the money and so forth. I don't know if I transcribe every interview, but a lot of them. Music, everything should move the story along, and be sure to get clearances. I used music from the 1949, that was the year of Oscar, and it got bounced on YouTube because I didn't have clearances for all of it. YouTube must have some program that can tell what is copyright and not. Original music, you can't go wrong. And a lot of music I would get on location. Like I remember a man was serenading Isabel in what amounts to a coffee house in Cuba. It was beautiful. And I got his permission to use that. You can't beat it. I mean, it's authentic Cuban music. Or at the airport, there's lots of music at the airport. So I'd film that. So I'd get music from different sources. But again, if you're using anything that you think needs a copyright, check into it, because most people like to play things on YouTube and they will not play it. I can tell you from personal experience. And I was wrong. I should have gotten the clearance. That was an error I made. I mean, you make documentaries, there's so many things to it, you will make mistakes. You will make mistakes. Some will come back to haunt you. You try to fix them as best you can. You know, I could still fix this. I could get the clearances. Uh, so nobody's perfect. You won't have a perfect movie. You get done and you always think, oh man, I should have put this. And it's decisions. That's the other thing. Uh, Life consists of making decisions, from what you're going to eat in the morning to what you're going to wear to, should I get gas in my car today or wait till tomorrow? It's decisions. And making a documentary, there's tons of them. Uh, from getting started, from the idea, and then you've got all the footage. Where do you begin? You've got to begin with something. You have to be ready for anything in making documentaries. It's a wonderful, enriching experience. It will light up your soul when you're done and you say you've done the best you can do, and you've done all this work and you've made all these decisions and you've risked your life, uh, and it turns out, as good as you can make it. It's a great feeling.